Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Movie Talk Monday on Questions with Connie. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about my favorite movies with problematic mother figures in honor of Mother's Day being behind us. So let's get into it, shall we? I'm not doing these movies in any particular order, so as far as that goes, these are not in ranking of my favorite to least favorite or anything like that. I just kind of made up the list and I'm going to talk to you about each one as we go. First, let's talk about Carrie. The 1976 original and the 2013 remake are both really, really great movies. I like them both for their own individual reasons, and the mother character is definitely one you will not soon forget if you have seen it. Carrie is just your classic horror movie with teen angst mixed with some telekinesis and a total bloodbath ending. So it is definitely one that if you haven't seen, I highly recommend watching. Either one, the remake if you can't handle the older movies. I enjoyed both of them. I know some people really don't like remakes. I can appreciate things about remakes when they're done well, but of course to each their own, but I like them both. This one, Piper Laurie and Julianne Moore's portrayal of the super problematic mother in these movies is just really out of this world. They do a great job of instilling absolute terror when you're watching them because you just feel nothing but empathy for the Carrie character because of everything she goes through with her mom. So definitely one of those movies that if you haven't seen it, definitely go ahead and watch that because it is one of those that you will not soon forget because of the crazy performances given by the mothers. The crazed look in their eyes and the intense, overbearing, and delusional performances that they give of the mother is just next level for sure. Second is Mommy Dearest. And if you've seen this movie, you can understand exactly why I added it to this list, even though it is not technically in the horror genre. So this one is what I would call a more realistic horror movie because it is definitely something that's based more in reality. So it is based on the Joan Crawford actress, and Faye Dunaway does a spectacular job of just portraying all of the intense and just next level craziness that happens in this movie. So it is all based on Christina Crawford, which is Joan Crawford's adopted daughter, a memoir that she wrote about all of her real life experiences. So some of those have been denied by the other children. However, I just think that the stories and how detailed they are, I don't imagine someone just making that up, personally speaking. But either way, I think that this movie is definitely one that sticks with you once you have watched it, and you can't forget exactly how intense the mom character is in this movie because it is just so over the top. And there is a scene where she wakes up Christina, the child, in the middle of the night saying, "No more wire hangers." And if you haven't seen that scene, or you've probably at least heard of that line because it's so iconic, just the way that that whole scene plays out is the stuff of nightmares. So if you haven't seen that movie and you're a horror fan, definitely give it a try because I would say it is one worth watching. Next movie I want to talk about is Lights Out. So this is one that I definitely mention in multiple of my movie reviews, and that is because I just think the concept is so brilliant because it answers the question of what if those things that you imagined when you turned the lights out were actually real? You know, like when you were a kid and you used to see things and you just kind of felt like it was your imagination playing with you, and then you turn on the lights and it was something completely different. So this basically turns that on its head. The reason that this one is in my list of crazy problematic mothers is because the mother character Sophie does everything you don't want her to do in this movie. And one of the main things is she prioritizes I don't know if she's really like a demonic character, but it's kind of like a demonic-like entity named Diana. And she definitely prioritizes her over her own children and even over her own mental health. And because of that, everything just kind of spirals. and ends up being what is this movie. So because of those really problematic decisions that she makes in the movie, she definitely had to be on this list. I will say, caveat to that, she does redeem herself in the end. So if you want to watch that movie, or if you haven't watched that movie, I highly recommend you do, because it is one that is one of my favorites. I definitely think that they just did such a great job of leaving just enough to your imagination that your mind just kind of spins out of control with some of these scenes, and it brings all of those deep, dark recesses of your childhood fears to life. Next, let's talk about The Babadook. So this is one that is on Netflix, and I know a lot of people who like horror have a love-hate relationship with this movie. So to me, this one is one that I would consider again, in the line of the same with Mommy Dearest, a kind of realistic horror or elevated horror, because it's not just about what it's about. It has multiple layers. So in this one, I would say it is definitely a play on what happens when we refuse to address our grief and we let it just kind of spiral out of control until it toxifies our lives, our relationships, and our own mental health. And you slow burn watch the main mother character just basically lose it in her grief. And it is a definite important one, I would say, to watch, because I found it to be an important watch just because I hadn't really thought about grief in that way, for to almost take on a evil villain character. And the way that they portray it in the movie just really puts a different spin on your perspective with that. So I definitely recommend watching this one if you haven't. The little boy who is in this movie does a spectacular job. I mean, I can't imagine being an actor at such a small age, but he pulls it off, let me tell you. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. Next, let's talk about Hereditary. So I have mentioned this one, I believe, in another of my videos. I'll probably mention it several times just because it had such a different feel to me than a lot of different horror movies have. For one, imagine just every creepy, spine-tingling feeling that you've ever had, or bad feeling, bad vibe, turned into a movie. That is this movie. So that is one thing that I thought they did expertly in this movie, is it just does this great job of creeping you out. Just everything you can imagine that makes you cringe, just little by little going along and just making you feel uncomfortable. That is what this movie does, to the extreme. There are several moments in this movie that just made my jaw drop, which is very hard to do considering I've been so desensitized. I've seen so many movies, especially horror movies, so that's impressive when a movie can do that. So this one is one that definitely is a standalone in that sense, but the mother character in this one definitely makes some questionable decisions. To me, one of the biggest ones is that she sends her 13-year-old daughter, who already has social issues and has a very highly sensitive and dangerous allergy, to a teenage party with her 16-year-old brother. I personally would never do such a thing, because, I mean, come on, you're asking for trouble and trusting a teenager with a child who has special needs that need to be attended to and who should be kept an eye on. A 16-year-old by nature is not really going to be prioritizing that, especially when at a party. But that's just my thought process on it. I just found that to be one of the biggest pitfalls of the movie. Like, why would you do that? But yeah, so of course that happens in every horror movie. Bad choices are made. This we all know. But that is why this one is on there. Also because there are some moments where the mother figure kind of snaps on her son, and it just is this very uncomfortable and over the top moment that I definitely felt like that deserved to be on this list. So if you haven't checked that out, I recommend watching it. However, I do recommend having something really happy to watch afterward. Otherwise, you might just be left with this very unsettling feeling. So definitely have something lined up afterward. Next, Coraline. So hear me out on this one. I know that it's not horror. I know that it's a kid's animation, like claymation type movie. However, if you really just read the storyline, this one is not something that I would really consider appropriate for kids because it would have freaked me out as a child to watch it. I love the movie as an adult, of course, and I think it's a great concept. But if you read it, it really does sound pretty bad, and I'll read it for you guys. It's about a neglectful mother and father that find their daughter is basically being lulled into another dimension by what is described as a malevolent interspatial shape-shifting witch/fae entity with the ultimate goal of consuming their flesh for strength and keeping their souls as prisoners. I mean, if that doesn't sound like horror to you, I don't know what does. So I definitely would not consider that a appropriate for children type storyline, but I digress. I still think it's a great movie. So the beldam, or this, witch fae character thing that tries to lull Coraline away from her parents, is definitely one that makes this list for me because she is like this psychotic, stop at nothing character that wants Coraline all for herself. And it is a really great movie. I personally enjoy when a kids movie is enjoyable for adults as well. And in this one, I think this one is more geared toward adults. I don't know. What do you think? Next, let's talk about The Taking of Deborah Logan. So this is one that not a lot of people have heard about. I know that it took me a long time before I actually saw it and heard about it. And once I saw it, I was like, man, how have I not heard about this movie before? That was insane. So it is basically a mockumentary style movie where these people go along and are trying to do this documentary about a patient with dementia and what her family's going through, and they connect with her daughter in order to get the agreement made to film her for the purpose of making a documentary about dementia. Basically, you get took along for the ride, and you figure out very quickly and very creepy like that something isn't all right with Deborah. The first indicator of that is that they go through, the documentary staff goes through this footage that they had taken overnight, and you see Deborah wander into the kitchen in the middle of the night, which is creepy enough, but then from one second to the next, she goes from standing in the kitchen to suddenly standing on the counter. And they basically figure out that there's no issue or glitch with the footage, and it is the very beginning of a slow burn into a tailspin of just horrifying stuff that ensues. So if you haven't seen The Taking of Deborah Logan, definitely watch it. It is nuts, and I thought it was one of those really underrated movies that I was happy to stumble upon, and definitely think you should watch if you haven't. Next on the list is Insidious Chapter 2. So for this one, you basically get taken into the crazy world of the deranged serial killer Parker Crane and exactly what brought him into being. So his mother in this movie is definitely a prominent figure, and she is terrifying and basically gives you a glimpse into exactly what type of environment could potentially create or mold a serial killer. And it definitely gives that vibe. And there is this scene where they are basically going into the further, and they are seeing basically a memory or the ghost presence of the mother and Parker having an interaction. And there's this moment where she just turns slowly and looks toward the camera, and it is just intense and horrifying, and I really enjoy it for that purpose. But if you haven't seen the Insidious franchise, highly recommend watching that. I know that they come out with movies every now and then. I'm not sure if they have another one lined up, but so far I believe it's 4 movies so far, and I've enjoyed all of them personally. I really think that Lynn Shay, the lady who plays Elise, which is one of the prominent figures in the movies, is just a joy to watch. She does such a great job portraying the medium character. So if you enjoy those type of movies and the supernatural vibe in a movie, then definitely check that out. Now let's talk about The Ring 1 and 2. So for this one, the reason I included it is because the Rachel character who plays the mom of the young boy Aiden in this movie, there's a very distinct, weird vibe going on between them. They definitely don't read as mother and son throughout the movie. It's a very strained, estranged relationship where he even calls her Rachel by her first name, which is just, bizarre. But throughout it, you just kind of wonder what's going on with her because, for example, these movies are based on a supernatural force being attached to this VHS tape, right? Where supposedly if you watch the tape, then this malevolent being then comes after you and kills you. So even if that's only a possibility, as a parent, would you bring that VHS tape home where your curious and mature for his age child who spends a lot of time alone is there with you? I don't think that's a smart choice, and because of that, and because she also kind of drags him along through this whole goose chase of trying to track down this demon thing that's going on in this video and trying to figure out what's murdering everyone, knowing full well that she has a child depending on her, is just kind of one of those things that definitely makes her a contender for this list. So that's why she's on here. So I definitely think that if you haven't seen The Ring 1 and 2, definitely one to check out. Next, let's talk about Mama. So this one, obviously from the name, the implication is there why this one is part of the list. So this one's about these two little girls who their dad goes into financial ruin because of some, I don't know if it's like embezzlement or something along that line. And he takes the children and runs off to a cabin in the woods that he owns and unintentionally ends up getting murdered, I think. Yeah, he runs off with them to the woods. Ipso facto, he ends up deceased or unalived. And the girls end up by themselves. These little girls, let me tell you, are so precious in this movie that it is just heart-wrenching to imagine these two little souls by themselves in a cabin with no one to help them. But that starting off is part of what makes this movie terrifying. But then there's this spirit thing that, comes in and becomes their mother. And because of their lack of communication with other people or the outside world, they take on this very animalistic vibe to them, and they don't really have good communication skills, obviously, because one of them is much younger when this happens. And this creature thing that takes over them and decides that they're her children basically stops at nothing to keep them to herself. So when their uncle discovers that they are alive because they've been looking for them since their parents, disappeared or whatever, the spirit thing doesn't take it very well. So it just kind of snowballs and it just is creepy. And the little girls, again, anytime these children can do such a great job in these movies, I am 100% impressed with that. I am still on the fence about whether I think that children should be involved in movies, period, or in Hollywood, especially with all of the terrible, awful things that do get mentioned about these children and what they experience, not to mention the fact that the laws are very lacking in protecting children. So there's that. But I do think that some of these movies would not be what they are without the performances of these young actors. And this one is definitely one of those. These young actresses do so amazing in this movie. It is one of those that you should watch, if for no other reason, just to see their performances, because they do so great. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. Again, it is called Mama. Next is Psycho. So this one is of course a classic, and there is a remake of this one starring Vince Vaughn. I enjoyed both of them. Definitely great watches in my opinion, but again, to each their own. You may not like remakes, and that's okay. But this one is of course one where who could forget the role that the mother plays in this movie. It is one of the biggest cinematic reveals, in history. So definitely one of those that has to be mentioned for that reason. And of course, there is also that little Easter egg that Jamie Lee Curtis's mother plays the first, victim, or the main victim in that shower scene, which I didn't find out until, a couple of years ago. And I still think that is mind-blowing that she is a legacy final girl, which is just, awesome. So it is just kind of one of those little, cool, fun facts about this movie, but definitely one of those that, once you see that whole mother influence and exactly what's going on with that, you don't forget it. On that same note, Friday the 13th, who can forget the iconic Mrs. Voorhees and what she does in that franchise to start it off? The fact that she is the first and main killer of the Friday the 13th franchise is one of those fun facts that a lot of people don't know a lot of the times, because, most people haven't seen a lot of the older movies, or if you're like me, I just kind of, watch some of the newer ones, and the older ones I kind of just saw bits and pieces when they were on cable when I was a kid. This one, the Mrs. Voorhees character, Jason's mom, is just the picture of insanity in this movie, and even, goes to mutter to herself in Jason's voice, urging herself to kill these poor camp counselors. So this is one that if you're going to do a list about, murderous or crazy mothers, she is definitely one of those that is top of the list. Next is Serial Mom, portrayed by Kathleen Turner. So something you might recognize her from is she plays Chandler's dad on the Friends series, and she also was in Romancing of the Stone and so many other projects. She is an amazing actress, and I definitely think she is underrated for some of the performances that she does. And this one is one of those that definitely sticks with you when you watch it. Basically, imagine the wanting to keep up appearances vibe that a lot of mothers have, or that pressure that they put on themselves in order to feel like they need to appear to have the perfect family or perfect life, and then turn that on its head and make it go insane. That is this movie. So basically, she is snapping because something bad happens and kind of disrupts that perfect family image. So once she murders one person that gets in the way of that, it just kind of snowballs from there. So it is one of those that I consider kind of almost like a dark comedy, and I enjoyed it. It's nuts, it's crazy, and it is definitely one of those that if you're thinking of a insane mother figure, this one definitely comes to mind. It is not as well known, but if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend checking it out. Another in that same keeping up appearances vibe is a movie called Hush. And I know there's a newer movie called Hush on Netflix that is a completely different storyline. So this one is, I believe, from 1998 or somewhere in the 90s, and it stars Jessica Lange and Gwyneth Paltrow, and it is just a great ride start to finish. So it is more categorized as a thriller, but in my opinion, it definitely reads horror because it's just crazy nonstop. This basically is the mother-in-law story from hell, and who doesn't love Jessica Lange? She is from American Horror Story. She's done so many projects. Cape Fear is one of her best performances for sure, and it's just one of those movies that if I knew her personally, I would definitely be like, you probably got a little crazy in you, huh? But she does such a wonderful job in this movie, portraying this intense mother figure who basically can't let go of her son. So her son and Gwyneth Paltrow's character are newly together, they're engaged, and he basically doesn't want to come back to their horse ranch to take over his dad's business. She is not down for that, so it turns into her stopping at nothing to try to get him back home. And Gwyneth Paltrow's character just kind of gets sucked into that, and by the end of it, you are just gasping along with Gwyneth Paltrow's character, trying to figure out when this is going to end and when her son is going to snap out of, his mama's boy syndrome and actually help his wife. So if you like those type of thrillers, this is one to watch. Jessica Lange, just like I said, does an amazing, phenomenal job in it. So definitely check that out if you haven't. And last but not least, I want to mention on this list is Ma. So this one is one that has Octavia Spencer, which she is one of my favorite actresses. She has a super broad range that she can do. She has done funny, like she's done Dinner for Schmucks, which she's hilarious in that. And if you haven't seen The Help, she is amazing in that movie, does a wonderful job, and honestly is one of the best parts of that movie. So definitely check her out if you have not seen the things that she's been in, but she does a phenomenal job as the character of Donna. And what happens in this is that she has this unhealthy fixation with some trauma that happened to her in high school, and that ends up trickling down into her developing this really obsessive need to become friends with and inappropriately entertain these teenagers in her small town. And it just spirals. It gets worse and worse, and more inappropriate and uncomfortable things happen, and then everything just kind of comes to a head. So if you enjoy anything she's been in, then this is one you absolutely have to check out. It is definitely a thriller / horror. She does a wonderful job in it. Another one of those where if I knew her personally, I would definitely look at her sideways because she does that good a job in it. So definitely check it out. Something else, I am going to be going to a Halloween Comic-Con-like event pretty soon, and I made a t-shirt that I wanted to share with you guys. So it is inspired by Insidious, and there you have it. It is the spectral sightings, and of course had to add the scary bit on the back. So I just wanted to share that little thing with you guys. I made one for me and my husband, so that way we match when we are headed out there. So yeah, so that's going to be it for this video, guys. Please make sure you like this video if you liked the content in it, and if you have any new ideas for me, let me know. Have you watched any of these movies? Do you have any that I missed that you happen to like about crazy psycho mothers? Definitely let me know in the comments below. And if you have not subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe button. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for subscribing, and I definitely look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Bye, guys. Oh, and also, happy Mother's Day to anyone out there who is celebrating or who celebrated Mother's Day. Happy belated Mother's Day.